This video is made possible by Second Call Defense. Second Call Defense provides immediate, upfront legal protection for a member who is forced to use any legal weapon for self-defense. So protect yourself today with Second Call Defense. I did. You'll find the link in the description. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm very grateful, so keep doing it. Don't stop. Listen, I've got a great interview today with Alan Rice from Gun Owners of America to talk about the Second Amendment fight across the nation. And so you may learn that there's actually some really good stuff going on. Now, there's some challenges, I get it, but there's also some good stuff. So make sure that you're watching the entire video. Now, just so that you know, as usual, this video will be about a half an hour long, but the interview itself is roughly an hour. So what I'll do with that to make it easier for you to consume is I'll do the first half an hour here, then I'll present that half an hour also in the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast, which is an audio podcast. You'll find it on your favorite podcast player. And then we'll do a second podcast, the next podcast after that, we'll have the second half of the interview. So you can hear the entire interview on the podcast. The first half is here, and the reason I do that without getting too long-winded about it is just because people don't want to watch a video that's longer than about 20 or 30 minutes. So that's the reason for that. All right, so anyway, you know that you can get to the podcast, and I will put a link in the description. Also, check us out on these other locations because YouTube is getting weirder by the day. All right, let's get to that interview with Alan Rice from Gun Owners of America. Alan, thank you very much again for joining me. It's always a joy to have you on. We had a great conversation last time you came around. I'm loving your GOA thing behind you, though. You didn't have that the last time, so things are looking up over there. You're getting really kind of specialized now. I love it.
I appreciate that, Joel. I'm getting help with technology from younger people.
Boy, do I understand that. I need all the help I can get. Technology is wonderful when it works. And we're so dependent on it when it doesn't work, it really, really sucks. Well, listen, you have a kind of a really good handle on what's happened nationally in the 2A fight. And one of the reasons I'm grateful you're coming on today is with everybody hyper-focused on gas prices and Ukraine and all that stuff, we kind of lose sight of the fact that while there's a battle going on in Ukraine, there's a battle going on in this country to save this country and to save the Second Amendment. There's some good stuff happening. I mean, I pulled up a couple of news stories here, which I'll put on the screen briefly. Yesterday, I think, Alabama became the 22nd constitutional carry state. And then, as far as I know Indiana is working on that, it seems. And I think there's some others, aren't there? I was pulling up a news story, let's see, earlier today. This one. It says Indiana, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio could soon allow constitutional carry. So constitutional carry is on the march. Alabama's already signed it into law. I don't know about these other guys, but I think there's a possibility we could add 3 or 4 more states this year, isn't there?
Well, there is, and it would be great to get a full 50% of the country as constitutional carry. So this is an issue that GOA has been pushing for almost 30 years. Back in the 90s, we called it Vermont carry because Vermont at the time was the only state that did not require a government permission slip to carry a gun. Some states, like New Hampshire, only required it for concealed and loaded or loaded in a vehicle. Similar in some of the southern states, North Carolina and Virginia, but Vermont was the only state that did not require a license or permit for any form of carry, open or concealed, in a car, out of a car, on a boat, it didn't matter. And they never have, and they still don't to this day. So we used to call it Vermont carry back in the 90s. And then the Alaska-Arizona laws took effect in the early 2000s, and they kind of changed the game a lot because they got rid of the requirement to have a license, but they left the license in place as an optional license for those who wanted it for reciprocity, for travel purposes. And so that worked out great. If you lived in Alaska or Arizona and you never left, never bothered getting a license. If you traveled, you went and got the license for reciprocity. And then after they did that, the other states started piling on. Maine, New Hampshire, we were actually late to the game, 2015 and 2017, respectively, for Maine and New Hampshire. But the states just keep adding on. People are realizing that, the Second Amendment says what it says. And a lot of the state constitutions go even further. Last year, Pennsylvania passed it and sent it to the governor. He vetoed it. But you know what? We're upset that he vetoed it, but we're happy that we got roll call votes in the House and the Senate. So if we get a good election outcome, we know where we can go with it because we know who's voting which way. So we lost it in Pennsylvania, but we're close. And it's been going across the country. Florida's been a problem. We're pushing for it in Florida, but the Republican supermajority down there won't even schedule a public hearing on the bill. So Florida has what I like to call a legislative dictatorship. The speaker or the Senate president can kill a bill just because they don't like it. There's no public hearing, no roll call vote, no opportunity for the public to speak. So that's a problem. We have an awesome state director in Florida, Luis Valdez. He's been getting a lot of local grassroots organizations to say they support this and passing resolutions. He's putting an enormous amount of pressure on the legislature. They can still kill it, but now they're not going to be able to kill it in the dark because everyone knows what they're doing.
Well, and Governor DeSantis just recently has called for it. I mean, he's very, it sounds like he's pro constitutional carry as far as I can tell from the news, and that he's urging the legislature to actually get a bill on his desk. Have I got that right? And if so, do you feel that drives additional pressure on the Florida legislature to get this done?
Yes, and yes. He has said he'll sign it more than once. He has called on the legislature to send it, but so far all we hear from them is crickets. And I would suggest that a lot of that talk from the governor is due to the pressure from Luis Valdez and his team in Florida, because he's really been amping it up and he's gotten it in the news and he's talking about it and he's putting the pressure on. And he's been able to show that the Florida Republicans have more in common with anti-gun New York than they do with, other southern states. And that is a positive sign. The legislature only has a few days left. I'd like to tell you, I think they're going to do it, but I don't think they are going to do it.
What I find encouraging, though, is that it's almost as if this is a juggernaut that these states, particularly the more red states, if you want to call it that — I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I vote independent. I'm more of a libertarian than anything else. But the red states seem to be the states that are going to actually make this happen. And I think this is going to march across the country such that you end up with a handful of these very left-leaning anti-gun states on the right and left coast that are looking at the rest of the country having gone constitutional carry. That seems to be what's happening if I'm reading the tea leaves right.
Well, you are, and it's been, as I said earlier, we've been pushing this since the 1990s. But not only are the red states doing it, there's also litigation. You've probably heard the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, Bruin being the head of the state police over in New York. That is before the U.S. Supreme Court. They heard oral arguments in November. We were actually really impressed with the oral arguments. The questions that were asked by justices who you would think are very hostile to the Second Amendment, like Kagan. We expect a ruling sometime in May or June. And, they could say, well, you can't have May issue licenses. Everyone who can legally own a gun can carry a gun. They could say the whole country's constitutional carry. I don't want to speculate on what they're going to say, but all the legal experts who we talk to are confident it's going to be a ruling in the favor of the gun owners. So at the same time, we have states saying you no longer need a license to carry a firearm. You have the courts weighing in saying if you need a license, it has to be reasonable. And you can't make people pay thousands of dollars in fees, set up burdensome requirements that no one can actually meet, and then deny the license anyway. So with the carry issue, it's coming at it from both ways, the legislative aspect and the courts. And that's a positive. That's a net positive. We can attack it on both sides.
I think giving GOA credit here is, you've mentioned it a couple of times, but I've been around a long time. And I remember when GOA was the outlier on this. And you guys were fighting tooth and nail for this, and everybody else was fighting for better processes to get permission slips. So I think it's important for gun owners to know that there was a time — now a lot of people are fighting for this, but it seems to me, if I remember correctly, there was a time when GOA, you guys were standing alone on this, and sometimes you were taking some heat over it. because you were considered the all or nothing lobby. Well, I got to tell you, I'm okay with all or nothing. I'd rather have the all, but, fighting for half measures doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So, well done, and kudos to GOA.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And I'd like to explain a little bit about our philosophy on legislative strategy. And it's actually very simple. And yes, people were mad at us in the 90s and early 2000s because we would come into a state and say, no, we don't want a permit. We don't want a license. We want Vermont-style carry. And there is a method and a logical progression that we use. We ask for what it is that we really want. And what we really want is unrestricted access to firearms for carry, self-defense, home defense, car defense, whatever. Everyone has a right to have a gun for really no reason at all. The Second Amendment doesn't state a reason. When you ask for what you really want and you hold true to your position, even if the legislature passes something less than what you want, because you've held true to your position, when you have a good election outcome, you can come back before that body in 2 years and say, I want you to repeal that license law. I want to go to full Vermont carry. If you agree to the compromise and we come in as an organization and say it's acceptable to have a license law with training and photos and fingerprints, and then we get a good election outcome, it's impossible to repeal it because they'll tell us, well, you just agreed to that 2 years ago. If we never agreed to it, it makes it real easy to come back later and try to get rid of it. And that's the problem with a lot of these license laws, is that they're not just a license. Where I live in New Hampshire, our license has been $10 since forever. No photos, no fingerprints, no training requirements, and almost no off-limits places, which made it difficult to convert the state to constitutional carry because we had a minimal license. In most of the states that enacted and that law dates to 1923, most of the states that enacted licensing in the modern era, they had to give up a lot to get that shall issue license. They had to agree to off-limits places. They had to agree to minimum ages. In most cases, it was 21. They had to agree to training classes. They had to agree to photographs and fingerprints. Criminals should be photographed and fingerprinted, not a citizen who wants to carry a firearm. And when gun activists agree to that stuff, as I said a minute ago, it's impossible to come back later and say reverse it because you already agreed to it. So we feel that our position is more intellectually honest. It reflects the true meaning and spirit of the Second Amendment, and it enables us to come back later and ask to undo the bad stuff.
It seems to me that GOA is growing a lot as a result. Are you not? I mean,
we have been growing. Our growth is coming in several areas. We've been getting out more on channels like yours. So I want to thank you. We're grateful for the exposure.
Well, you're quite welcome anytime.
A lot of the YouTube community has really welcomed us, and we'll go, GOA spokespeople will go on to any media, anytime, anywhere, any place. So that's helped our growth in the grassroots side. The grassroots gun owners are learning through new media what we're all about and what we stand for. But we also have an industry program now. We have a strategic partnership program. If you go to gunowners.org/partners, you can see the lengthy list of companies, some of the best in the firearms business, who have partnered with GOA to help deliver our no compromise message to their customers. And we have our Caliber Club program for retailers and ranges, and they can sell exclusive GOA branded merchandise, and they give out our membership flyers and cards to their customers. So through those two partnerships, that's helped our growth. Couple that with the YouTube channel and a lot of the new media that we take very seriously and we respect, that's driven a lot of our growth. And then in turn, when we go before a legislative body and we send an alert to our members and ask them to take action, the numbers are up. The legislators are hearing from a lot of grassroots members because we make it easy. We give them a pre-written message. They can click a link, figures out from their zip code who the legislators are, and it lands in the inbox. And we find that most gun owners, they want to take action. They want to do it, but they have jobs and families and lives. If we make it easy, they'll do it. And as we grow the numbers, the legislators hear from more people, and that in turn helps our numbers grow even more.
Listen, I was on your website today, and I didn't even know about this, and so I would love to have your thoughts on this. I was looking at the alerts you've got here. GOA, and you'd think I'd know about this because I do get your alerts. GOA combating Biden and Bloomberg in court to save Second Amendment sanctuaries. I just mentioned that my second home state, Arizona, is a Second Amendment sanctuary state, and it does not surprise me at all that the federal government is trying to undo that. What's going on with that case?
So there's a couple of things going on. There's a couple levels here. So the sanctuaries, for the viewers who might not know, is simply a statement by a state or a local jurisdiction that their law enforcement officers will not enforce federal gun laws. The case that you're referring to that ended up in court, I believe, is the Missouri case. And Missouri passed a very strict sanctuary law that not only said that their state and local police will not enforce anti-gun federal laws, this statute requires these officials to pull their law enforcement officers out of any federal task forces, any collaboration, anything at all that has to do with federal, state and local enforcement of federal gun laws. They're not going to obstruct it. The feds are going to do their job. But if they want to pass these laws, they need to enforce them with federal law enforcement officers, and there's not enough of them. We think it's a very noble goal to not enforce unconstitutional laws. So the Biden Justice Department is suing Missouri over it. We filed it. I believe if we haven't yet, we're going to file an amicus brief on that. That's what that case is about in Missouri. But since you asked the question about the sanctuaries, I want to bring up the budget. I don't know if it's the budget bill or it's the government funding bill that was passed in the late night hours a couple days ago.
Yeah, it's the omnibus. That's a big old gigantic omnibus bill, isn't it?
Yep.
It's got a bunch of garbage in it. Oh, my God.
My colleague, Aiden Johnston, wrote an alert on that. But basically, the sections that concern firearms owners are a section that undercuts, specifically designed and intended to undercut the sanctuary movement because it'll provide funding for state and local police to enforce anti-gun federal laws. But at its core level, state and local police are trained and educated with state and local tax dollars. After they're sworn in and working, there might be federal money to pay their salaries or maybe pay for equipment and vehicles, but they get their basic training and it's paid for at the state level. So obviously, it's a perverted way to look at it. But the federal government is pushing that, and I think that passed the Senate last night. So they want to undercut the sanctuary laws by saying, fine, we'll pay the salaries and so forth of state and local police so they can enforce our unconstitutional laws. We haven't really gone through all that yet, so there's still some things that I just don't know. But that's the basic gist of it. They're trying to undercut the sanctuary movement. Biden knows what he's doing is wrong. We've seen a history of ATF abuses, and it's now come to light with the out-of-business records. The ATF is using the records of gun dealers who've gone out of business to create a registry. And the law requires that when a business goes out of business, they send their records to ATF. I like to liken it like this. When a car dealer goes out of business, they don't send their records to the Department of Transportation. But yet gun dealers have to send their records to the ATF, and the ATF is creating a registry. Couple that with the law that says if a person buys more than one handgun in 5 days from a federally licensed gun dealer, that creates what's called a multiple sales report, and that goes to ATF. So that's a second piece of paper. What's interesting is they have these records. I've never seen, the ATF record keeping apparatus, but based on the number of records they say they have, it's in the billions. Based on manufacturers' data, there's about 400 million firearms in America. So the records are probably in triplicate, because think of it this way. You buy a gun, you don't like it, you sell it to a dealer as a used gun and buy something else. The dealer sells it to someone else. Then the dealer goes out of business. There's at least two records from the first time you bought it, and then the second person who bought it from the dealer you traded it into going to the ATF. That's a concern for two reasons. It's a concern that the government has records of who owns guns because federal law strictly prohibits it. But it's also a concern because the records are wrong, and that's a way the ATF can target the innocent and accuse them of crimes that they haven't committed by perverting those records.
If you purchase a gun and you're required to go through a background check, then in my humble opinion, if you pass the background check and the gun is then given to you and it's in your custody, that paperwork ought to just go in the shredder, and that ought to be the end of it, because you passed the background check. I mean, am I missing something here?
No, you're not. And in fact, the legislation that enables NICS, there was an amendment to it that was drafted by our counsel, Mike Hammond, that actually says the NICS transaction record has to be destroyed within, it's a relatively short period of time. I believe it's 24 hours. So they have to destroy that record, but they don't destroy the record of the form that you filled out at the gun dealer to buy your gun. They only destroy the record that they put your name into the system and they did a NICS check and you were approved. So
the 4473, that federal form exists, and it exists in perpetuity. It does not ever get destroyed.
No, it exists. Current regulations require the dealer to keep it for 20 years. The new Biden rules that have not been finalized yet are requiring the dealers to keep them indefinitely. But the dealer also keeps a record called a bound book, and he writes in the book where the gun came from, just let's say Smith & Wesson, and who it went to, Joel Persinger. The bound book is required to be kept indefinitely. But another problem, and I have an article on GOA's website about this, is the prevalence of computer software for creating the bound book. They were historically handwritten, and the boxes are very small. There's commercial suppliers where dealers can buy bound books. Companies have come out with software that when the gun comes in, the dealer scans the barcode, and it goes into the bound book, make, model, and serial number. The dealer types in, received from, whatever wholesaler, that goes in, and then when the gun is sold, your name, your address, your date of birth go in there. And this software is dangerous. It's dangerous because every version that we've seen has a feature where it can be exported to a thumb drive, to another hard drive, to an email, and as an Excel file, a PDF, any number of modern file formats. And what the software vendors promote as a benefit, we say is very dangerous and should be shut down. And what that is they say, look, give ATF a thumb drive when they come in for your compliance check, and they'll leave your premises with the drive, because no gun dealer operating a retail store wants an ATF agent in the building. It's bad for business. So ATF leaves with the thumb drive. The problem is they leave with your information, my information, and anybody else who bought a gun from them. I became aware of this software peripherally about 5 or 6 years ago. I learned a lot about it at SHOT Show 2020, which is why I put an article on gunowners.org explaining how dangerous it is. At this year's SHOT Show, I learned more about it and the way just within 2 years, the software vendors have been able to integrate it with cash registers and point of sale. And everybody likes easy, and the gun dealers don't care. And the real big box gun dealers like Bass Pro Shops and the national chains, they've taken it a step further. They have you fill out your 4473 on a computer screen. They say then they print the paper copy and the customer signs it and the computer is erased. I don't believe it's erased. I believe it's captured. I can't prove that, but I don't think that anything that's typed into a computer is ever truly erased.
It's not going anywhere, particularly in a world now where all computers are interconnected through the internet. That data is not getting erased. I don't believe it. I can't prove it's not either, but I mean, at the same time, I'm of the opinion, I got a cell phone, you got a cell phone, and what you got is a bell on your butt. Anybody can ring with the push of a button anywhere in the world. And if you think these cell phone companies don't track you everywhere you go, we know Google does. Apple says they don't, I think, but they do. I mean, come on. They all do. We're being followed around. We have no privacy. And then you go and you buy a gun and you want to take their word for it. Wink, wink. We're going to delete that information. No.
Well, my advice to people is to go to a small local mom and pop gun shop that's still on a paper system. And that's the best advice I can give your viewers, give GOA members, is go to the small local shops that are running paper. Might cost you a little more, might be a little bit more inconvenient because you need to handwrite the form, not fill it out on a computer and type it, but how much is your privacy worth? I look at it this way. My name is out there. I've been doing gun politics and activism for 34 years. They know who I am. I'm not a secret. I still want to protect myself when they don't need to have a list of the guns I own. Well, there is some good news. The good news is Representative Cloud, Michael Cloud from Texas, has introduced a bill to basically repeal and destroy the ATF registry, and having dealers no longer send out of business records to ATF. It's a short bill. It's real simple. It's two pages, but it does that. And in this Congress with Nancy Pelosi, it's probably not going anywhere. But the fact that the bill's now in, has about 50 co-sponsors, lets us build some momentum. We can talk about it. If we get a good election outcome, we can push it hard, and we can use it as a vehicle to educate, grassroots gun owners on what this is, why it's a problem, and support the Cloud bill.
Would you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because what do you, and you kind of just did, but I want to give you a little bit more opportunity to do that. We've got Slow Joe, China Joe, whatever you want to call him, in the White House. He's not going to sign that. You got Pelosi, who's creepy beyond belief, and kooky as kooky could be, and she's not going to let that pass. And so what do you say to the gun owner who says, well, that's a waste of time? What good does that do?
It does a lot of good. Because the bill, there's a couple of things that the viewers need to understand. Once the bill's in, it can be used as an amendment for pretty much anything. Our counsel, Mike Hammond, was legal counsel to the Senate Republicans for years. He's a whiz at getting things attached to other bills as amendments. Once it's there, when we have the language and we vetted the language, we can go anywhere with it. Once it's there and we vetted the language and we have the co-sponsors lined up, we can do it again after a good election outcome. So by doing it now, even though we have Nancy Pelosi and President Biden, we're doing all the prep work, all the legwork. We vetted the language. We found the co-sponsors. We got the bill introduced. We got people talking about it both in the grassroots and on Capitol Hill. The next step is to get a good election outcome. If we waited for a good election to introduce every bill, every pro-gun measure that we wanted, we'd be overwhelmed. By doing the prep work now and getting it ready, we're ready to go if the election goes the way we would like it to go in November. And that's the reason we do it early.
Well, that gets into the kind of the inside baseball stuff inside the Beltway that honestly, unless you deal with it every day, it doesn't make any sense. So I wanted you to explain that because I don't really understand it. And sometimes when I looked at the news story about this, I thought, well, that's a waste of time. But it's not a waste of time.
No, it's not.
It's actually a very positive thing. And the reason why I think it's important to state that and talk about it is because we get so inundated with negative news about our rights. Any positive news is a joy. And the last thing we want to do is look at something that's an incremental step and say, well, that's a waste of time. I think if we understand that it's not, that it is an incremental step, it's part of fighting the battle, then honestly, it encourages a little bit. And I got to tell you, I talk to a lot of gun owners, and they need encouragement just about now.
Well, we're also supporting a bill by Congressman Chip Roy, also of Texas, to remove any other weapons from the NFA. And any other weapon it's an interesting NFA device. It's not a machine gun. It's not a sound suppressor. It's not a short-barreled rifle. It's not even a short-barreled shotgun. Most any other weapons are made from a shotgun receiver that has never been manufactured into a shotgun, and they typically have a barrel less than 18 inches. Good way to picture it is if you look at the Mossberg Shockwave and the Remington TAC-12, the predecessor to those were AOWs, and then they figured out how to make it longer to get it out of the NFA. So those were AOWs, and there's a bill in to remove AOWs from the NFA. People say, well, it only transfers for $5, not $200, like a sound suppressor. It's true. It's a $5 tax. The problem is the buyer still has to submit a photo, still has to submit fingerprints, still has to wait for 9 to 12 months to get government permission to buy it. So that's a positive. And there's two other bills because GOA is committed to taking apart the NFA. There's two other bills, one to remove short-barreled rifles from the NFA and one to remove short-barreled shotguns from the NFA. A short-barreled rifle would be a rifle with a barrel less than 16 inches, and a short-barreled shotgun would be a shotgun. We would have to have the shoulder stock. Any other weapons have a pistol grip, and a shoulder stock and a barrel less than 18 inches. So we have three bills that we're supporting. They're both on all three are on our website to chip away at the NFA. Same strategy as the cloud bill. We probably don't have the votes now. We might be able to get it as an amendment to something, but get the bills in, vet the language, run it by legal counsel, line up the co-sponsors. If we get a good election outcome, we're ready to go.
Thank you for watching through the interview. I really, really appreciate it. Now, remember, that was the first half of this interview. There's a lot more to it. That will actually be presented on the GunGuyTV audio podcast. So you'll find it on your favorite podcast player. It's all over the place. Just look for GunGuyTV Firearms Podcast on any search engine, and you'll find it on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and everywhere else. You might also check out GunGuyTV Crew. You can join the crew and help contribute to help GunGuyTV stay alive on both Patreon and Locals, or I should say either Patreon and Locals. If you don't like one, try the other. You'll find links in the description. Have a great week. Thank you very much for all of your support. And wherever you go, whatever you do, stay safe.